All right, folks. So today I'm joined by Gary Fox from the Entrepreneur Experiment. So Gary runs one of the top business podcasts in Ireland. I was just saying to Gary before we went live, I really appreciate his approach that it's based in just the basics and the fundamentals. So Gary, thank you for jumping on today.
No bother. I'm delighted to be here. It's great.
Great, mate. So maybe we'll just quickly go through your background, if you for people so they know more about like who you are and how you got into the podcast space.
Yeah, it's always one of those questions. I never really know how to answer it. I'll start with the podcast because it's the most frequent or the most recent thing. I started that 5 years ago now. It's called the Entrepreneur Experiment, as you alluded to earlier. And essentially, I started it to meet interesting people. I started to get more mentors, and I started it to just learn, just learn. Like I constantly want to be learning. I read like a huge amount of books, but books are very passive. And I think nothing teaches you like actually having mentors. So I just want to have good mentors, to be honest. And I say this to everybody when they reach out and they're like, oh, how do I get a mentor? I was like, the people you want to mentor you shouldn't have the time because they're the people that are busy,
Mm.
that are doing the things. So I was like, right, how can I be a bit smart about this? So I was like, I can give a value exchange. A good value exchange is like giving someone a platform. I was really into like all the US podcasts, like How I Built This, Tim Ferriss especially. And
Yes, me too. Yeah.
I'm going to start I have a love-hate thing with Tim, but we'll talk about that later. And I was like, okay, these are great, but I can't really relate to them. I'd love if there was an Irish podcast whereby I could listen to all the people I want to, number one, talk to, but number two, also have like this like record for people who can't access mentors because not everyone lives in Dublin, not everyone has access to these people. I was like, I can't be shooting two birds with one stone here by just getting all these incredible people to meet me first. I could build an incredible network and then I could share that with people who can't get access to mentors. So that was kind of the initial thesis of it. I didn't really overthink it. I didn't overplan it. I just started.
Great, man. Just one thing as well with the mic, it's not as clear as it was. I think it's just because it's your side.
It's actually the earbuds. So the earbuds
Ah,
are kind of infrequent. I can switch them out to the mic on the laptop if that works.
no, that's fine now. I think it just
Okay.
sounded a bit less clear. But yeah,
Okay.
totally. I think the podcast, it's like such a hack. Like I started a podcast 2 years ago, and I just contact fitness professionals who are like at the top of their game, and they jump on for an hour and they just teach me, and then I share it with my audience. So it's like, would you recommend that for people starting out, just as a way to kind of get their foot in from a mentoring standpoint?
Yes, if that's something you want to do, definitely. There's like a cliche podcast at the minute. Everybody's got a podcast. Not everyone has a podcast, but lots of people start podcasts. So I would say
Yeah.
if you're going to start one, commit to it for at least a year. I say that to everybody. It feels like if you're going to do it, podcasts aren't a quick hit. They're not something that's going to like explode overnight, but they'll be the most rewarding medium you can ever do because, like you alluded to there, it's the biggest hack in the world. You get this intimate conversation with someone, and then you get to share it with thousands or maybe millions of other people. So it's incredibly useful. Yeah, if I was starting my career again, definitely I would start some sort of content vehicle. And I always say this to people because I teach students, how to start podcasts and different things. But I always say to them, go to the medium you're most comfortable. If you're a really good writer, start writing. If you're really good on audio, start a podcast. If you're really good on video, start a podcast because you got to do video with podcasting now. But or start like a YouTube channel, or just go wherever you're strongest and go wherever you'll be most consistent because that's what everything comes down to. And I think we'll talk about this like fitness and business mirroring each other.
Yeah.
I think they mirror each other perfectly. Like the only, I had this chat with someone yesterday. What really marks out all the truly exceptional people is it's just a survival thing. You just got to survive long enough and be consistent long enough to then let all the work catch up with you.
Yeah. It's also like what you're saying there about watching the American podcasts. And then, like, I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan as well. But when I started listening to your podcast, I was like, this is awesome because he's talking about like startups, but he's Irish. So you're using Irish references. So it's actually, even though it's a similar, you're practicing something that's already been successful, it's a different spin because you're Irish, it's your story. And I really resonate with that part of it as well.
Yeah, the American ones are great, right? But they can veer more so into entertainment than actually education. And
Mm.
look, you need a bit of both, right? Yeah, I don't think you have to like be dull and dry about it either. But I think sometimes when I'm listening to the American ones, I'm like, yeah, this is just kind of like an hour I'm going to like be entertained, as opposed to like,
Mm.
oh, that's such a really valuable lesson that I can apply because I've met Connor and I know how that would work, you know?
Yeah. One thing I'd like to jump into is the business, brain, and body. And what, because a lot of the times with starting a business, it's 100% your focus has to be in the business to make it work initially. Was there anything that changed in your life that you were like, okay, I need to start prioritizing other parts, or was this something you always did?
Both, to be honest. Like I always was really, really into fitness, really into my body, but probably not maybe the mental side of things. Um, and I would be good to a certain level, but I would never take it to the next level. And it was as I kind of went through the podcast journey, I just learned a lot of what not to do. I learned like there's no point doing this if you're not going to listen to what people are saying, and that might seem really obvious. But how many conversations have you had with people where you're like, oh yeah, that's really good advice, and then you just completely ignore it? Like it's the most common thing in the world. You're like, oh yeah, no, that sounds really logical. Yeah, that sounds really good. But then you just don't, take that advice. I'm like, you're sitting down with some of the smartest people in the world here, and you're seeing all these themes emerge. And I kept seeing the same thing emerging all the time. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I looked after myself a little bit more. You know, I wish I'd enjoyed the journey more. And it just kept coming up. And I would have these conversations with successful people, right? The barometer of success veers wildly depending on what your goals are. But a lot of people look at success as like, oh, they made a lot of money. Success means all different things to all different people. But if you were looking at the barometer of, oh, they made a lot of money, some of the most successful people by that barometer were some of the most miserable people I met. And I was like, okay, Gary, you're on a journey here. You're meeting these people. You have an inside track here. This is good. How you make it great is if you apply it to yourself. So I started to really be way more deliberate with everything that I do and far more conscious, not just kind of like going along with the flow. In the past, I probably would have had an element of the kind of Irish mindset of like, ah, sure, it's grand, it is what it
Mm.
is, and kind of let things go. That definitely came from a lack of confidence as opposed to like just being a freewheeling spirit. It was just kind of like, oh, I'll just go with the flow on this one. And it was during COVID then, whereby I had a lot of time to kind of sit back and think and to kind of reevaluate a lot of things like a lot of people have. Like it's kind of a bit of a cliche at this stage, but it's true. I think it's the first time a lot of people just stopped and went, right, where am I going? What am I doing? So I was on a totally different track. I was building a property management business, which is very, very different to what I'm doing now. Um, and it was like very, very intense, very stressful, 24/7 kind of job. And it was only during COVID that I stopped and started doing more podcasting. So I'm like, I enjoy this so much more. My balance of life is just so much better. Just everything got so much better. And then I took the very hard decision to not start that business up again because it literally cratered during COVID. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, I could start this up very easily again. I'd pick up exactly where we left off. We're in the hospitality sector, so like once the hospitality sector started to rebound, I was like, oh, I could literally start this up again in the morning and I would be successful at it. But I literally had that conversation with myself going, what do you want to do for the rest of your life, not just for the next like 5 years? So essentially I took like 5 steps back because I built that business from scratch. I built that from zero. I started with like 500 quid, built it up to a €500,000 a year business um over like 6, 7 years. So I was letting go of all that to take this kind of leap into the unknown. But sometimes this is very, very true for business and in life. Like we all have these plans of like, I'm going to do this and this and this. And I'm planner number one. I love planning. I like to have a clear direction, but you can over plan to the point of not doing anything. So I have this written in my principles document now. It's plan 10, act 90. So plan 10% of the time and act 90% of the time because I could not have ever predicted 5 years ago that I'd be sitting here with you on a Thursday morning and this is essentially my job. I could not in a million years have predicted that. So there's definitely an element of you just have to get going sometimes.
With the point you made there as well, at what were you financially in a good place to be like, okay, like I can let things go? Sometimes you hear people like, yeah, I just burnt the ships and I went all in and like I just met at work, which I don't think is always like the best idea from a
I
a
don't
health
think so
standpoint.
either. I don't think so either.
Uh,
I was kind of a bit of both, right? Been really honest with you. I was a bit of both. I'd made good money from the business, but it was doing really well, as in like it was kind of foolish, I guess, to almost close it down because I could have started up again. It could have done really well again. Like I'd made some money, but like not enough to like maybe enough money to last me like a couple of years, maybe,
mhm.
which isn't a lot. Like I have a wife, a house. We were trying to have a baby at the time. So it wasn't like, oh, I've loads of money. I can just indulge a whim and a fantasy. It definitely wasn't that at all. I've never been in that position to kind of indulge myself, but I've always backed myself in different positions. Like I've started multiple businesses because to me, there's no real alternative. It's always to back myself and to do my own thing. But it was a very, very hard decision to let that go. Um, Without the kind of like, because podcasting and media, like it can be super lucrative, but definitely not at the start, as in like you're kind of building from a very low base. So the business body brain thing, just to circle back on your whole question, it all kind of shifted together. Like it wasn't this overnight thing. It was just this gradual movement towards looking after myself more, looking after my mental health more, taking active, engaging steps like doing therapy, like becoming more engaged across every single strand of my life and been far more deliberate going, I'm going to take these exact steps across business, body, and brain. And because I wanted to have a different narrative to the podcast, I didn't want to just talk to business people and have this really binary conversation about like, and then what happened? And then what happened? And then what happened? And then you made loads of money. Brilliant. Because it's just so one dimensional. And I never want to have a boring one dimensional life. And I never want to portray that to other people because as the audience has grown, I'm very conscious that a lot of people are listening and a lot of people are looking for inspiration to this. And I just don't think it's a one. I don't think you have to give up looking after yourself and your body to have a good business. I think there are elements of like life goes in seasons. You touched on it there earlier.
Mm.
Life does go in seasons whereby you have a mode where you're like working like hell. I'm literally just about to enter a mode now for the next 12 months where I'm really doubling down on the podcast and doubling down on all the events that I'm doing. But I've equally just come out of a mode of 2 years of we had our first baby. So for 2 years, I've been very much focused on being a dad, being present, being available. So you have seasons in life. There's never these like, I'm just all in on the business. I think what a lot of people do is they use their business as an excuse not to focus on themselves. And they embrace this martyr complex of like, oh, I'm doing it for the business. I'm doing it for the business. When in reality, you're not really. No one's forcing you to do that. That's a choice. Everything is. I drive my wife mental because I say anytime someone's complaining, I go, "That's a choice. That's a choice. That's a choice you're making. You're choosing to do those hours. You're choosing to be in that relationship." I just go, "That's a choice," because I try bringing everything back to simplicity because sometimes I think we use excuses. Oh, I'm just on the track now. This is just how things are. You're like, that just sounds like you're too lazy to actually engage with the process.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought process because you can be in a season of building or doing something really intense and you need to really focus and you need to really maybe sacrifice other parts of your life. But then that can just be your loop. Like, oh, once this thing is ready, then I'll start getting fit. Like it's, I talk to people every week who are like in their 60s, in their late 60s. It's really heartbreaking. Like they are just in such a hole now with their health because it's been like 50 years of literally not addressing things. And now they're kind of coming around being like, oh, I need to do something now. Um, is it your daughter? Is that what you said? Or was it son
Yeah.
was born
Yeah,
daughter?
daughter.
did that have an impact on the way you view the world since all that happened?
I hate saying it because it's such like one of those cliche things. Like, oh, I hate it. Blech. I hate it. It even makes me sick when I say it myself, and I almost try to like not go on about it. But 100% it has. Like it has to. And there was a few other factors that happened around that time. And the journey to having our daughter was very difficult. We had a lot of challenges. We had multiple miscarriages. Um, and that brought a lot of perspective into my life because I think when you're younger, you just think, oh, I'll do this and then I'll do that and then I'll do the other. Whereas when you get a bit older and just through experience and through life experience you're living, you kind of realize not everything is a given. You don't always get these things. These are not, you're not entitled to anything. No one's entitled to tomorrow. No one's entitled to have like a happy family and live happily ever after. Like things will come out of the blue that you never expected. And this is why I always say to people, I was like, have plans, but hold them loosely because it'll be a call on a Tuesday morning that just sends your life careering off into a different orbit. Um, so like loosely hold your plans is kind of a thing I kind of think about all the time because you need to be flexible, especially in the modern world, the way the world has gone the last 5 years. You have to be adaptable and flexible. But having her, I made a deliberate choice to live by example, not by like, show me, don't tell me. That's kind of how I kind of try live with her is that I want to show her a good example as opposed to like, I hate when parents and people in general say, you should do this, you should do that, you should be this. And you're like, well, you drink too much, you smoke, you don't exercise, you work too much. You can't tell people what they should do if you're not an example of that yourself. So I kind of made this decision when we had Willow that I was like, right, lead by example as much as possible. Look, no one's a saint, right? No one's like 24/7 living a clean edge lifestyle and doing they're not their best selves every single day. But I was like, if you're doing 80/20, if you're doing 80% of the stuff right, you're giving her a good shot at having like some good habits and some good lifestyle examples that she can follow. Whether she does or not, that's completely up to her. But I'll be happy because I've given it my best shot.
Yeah, it's a really good framework. Like, a lot of people, a question will come up. I can't remember what coach replied online, but the person was like, I want my daughter to eat better. And they were like, yeah, just improve your diet and they'll follow, So it's basically your children will most likely follow what you're doing up to a point, then they'll probably start rebelling like in the teens.
Precisely. So like all you can do is your best, right? And like no one else like, there's no manual here. Like, you have a kid,
Mm.
you're like, holy shit, this is wild. Like you're just it's just full force, absolute brilliant chaos. But like all you can do is your best, right? And all if you can stand back and go at the end of each day, never mind the end of each year, then you say you go, yeah, I give my best shot today. I can be pretty proud. Like in the last 2 years, I can definitely say I've given it my best shot at being a dad. I've been focused, I've been present, and I've been lucky enough to do that. But also, I made the decision to do that. Like I've passed up opportunities, I've passed up things to do whereby, no, I'm going to focus on being a dad. But now that she's two, she's in crash and she's doing her own thing now. And to a point, right? She's still ain't two, but now is the time where I can like, okay, now I can focus more back on these other things. So I think I'm always very wary of people who just talk in absolutes, who talk in absolutes about everything all the time, because they're generally people who aren't practitioners. Because practitioners know there are no absolutes because things fluctuate and you have to be flexible and you have to be adaptable. I think that's the greatest skill in the modern world is the ability to be flexible and adaptable while being consistent.
Yeah, big time. How did you make that work? I've seen you mention Atomic Habits a few times, so I'm guessing you're, about building habits, which I think it's a great book. Did you find you had to adapt a lot over the last 2 years with routines and everything?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I like routine. And having a baby is the opposite of having a routine because you have to try give them a routine, but they don't follow a routine. They're not robots, right? Everyone
Yeah.
talks about like, they need routine and they absolutely do. But they're also going to wake up two, three, four times a night. So like you have to be able to be flexible around that. Like even last night, like my daughter woke up three times. and then today you're probably 20-30% off your peak. You know what I mean? So you can't then go, "Oh, I'm gonna absolutely smash it out of the park today." But what you can do is show up. You can show up every single day. And what I've learned is, and this is probably something I didn't really understand or kind of give enough credence to when I was younger, is that it'll ebb and flow a lot. Life will ebb and flow a lot. And for you, it's just about riding the waves and making sure that you show up every single day in some form. You don't have to like be smashing at 10 every day, but are you showing up at a 7 every day? Because if you're showing up at a 7 every day, you're going to stack far more wins than losses. I think of it as like, are you stacking wins today or are you stacking losses? You talked about it perfectly there. And it's one of the saddest things in the world is someone at 60 going, now it's time to change. When you think of the compounding effect of every decision they've made in their life up to that point, it's the opposite of momentum. It's of momentum pushing you in the wrong way. So as Atomic Habits, it was the compound effect. Those books definitely shaped how I think about consistency and compounding, because I talk about momentum, consistency, and compounding all the time in the podcast, because that's essentially what life is like. Just doing the good things. From the fitness world, it's like it's not doing one good workout a week. It's can you do 5 decent ones, right? Just showing up one day a week. Yeah, it's better than doing 0 days a week, but I'd rather do like 5 solid days than like be, it's the quote of like, be consistently good, not occasionally great. That's
Yeah,
the
I
one.
love that quote.
I love it all the time, and I think about it all the time. I'm like, right, just be consistently good, Gary. Just consistently. And like the one thing about the podcast is people keep saying to me, "You're everywhere. You're everywhere. You're everywhere." I'm yes and no. I'm just really consistent. Like I don't miss a Thursday. Before we come on here, I was just working on today's episode. It's going up a few hours later than normal, but it's going up. We don't miss Thursdays. Like we don't trip. Like if you trip, you don't turn it into a face plant. If you trip for a few hours, you just get back up and you get it done. So they're the kind of small things that I've taken. I've taken them from lots of books. Like I read loads of books all the time. I should be on commission from Atomic Habits. If James
Yeah.
Clear is listening, I will at least some sort of plaque for having driven the most sales, because I talk about
Come
it
on
all
the
the time.
podcast, James. Like that would be a nice return.
My one though,
On
my one.
yours, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like, but like, you just love these people, like, because like you just access every bit of information in the world. The information is no longer the problem; it's the implementation.
Yeah, you touched on, I think it's like it's so similar in fitness as well. Like just the superpower is consistency. And the way you be consistent is just scale stuff way down, like to and just keep the momentum going each week. Like that's why I love talking to people like you, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's the same fitness. It's the same advice in fitness. Um,
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to switch gears to, mate, is like you've talked to a lot of people over the last 5 years who are uber successful, very wealthy, high status, and probably in a place a lot of people want to be. I read Peter Attia's book. Big fan of Peter Attia. I literally read the last chapter this week, which is all about his emotional health problems. Um, do you see that pattern, or is it even something like that workaholism in entrepreneurship? Do you think that's a consistent pattern?
100%.
And maybe just
There's,
explain to people as well what we're talking about if they haven't read the book.
and I've thought about this a lot because it's fascinating. Like I get to sit down with some of the most interesting people in the world for like maybe 2-3 hours at a time, and just the insights you get from them, and then the pattern recognition you see from, oh, that's the same as that person, and that's like that person. The closest thing I can equate it to is an addiction. Like some of them are absolute addicts, addicts to the game. They're not even addicts to the outcome. They're addicts to the game. Often the outcome is secondary. The worst is when I've met people and they worked really hard on something and they got the outcome. And I was asking this question for a while and I've stopped because it's quite grim when you get the question answered. I talk to people who've had like big outcomes, right? Like big, like I love the way they call them liquidity events. They've got really rich, right? They've sold their business, or they've like, sold out a part of it, or they've had a big windfall. and they're set financially for life. Like, let's say, somewhere from 10 million upwards, right? Like proper cash, right? Never would have to do a day's work in their life again. And I'll ask them, I was asking them all the same questions, like, what did it feel like that day? Because that's what we all want to know, right? We all want to know what's beyond the curtain, what's on the other side of the door. And more often than not, the honest ones would say, didn't really feel like anything, Gary, to be honest. Um, and I was like, okay, why not? And they're like, oh, well, I had to work there for 2 years because I had an earn out clause. And I was like, okay, fast forward me then 2 years. What did it feel like the day you left the company and you had all this money? And they were like, nothing. Didn't really feel like anything. I didn't get that high that I thought I would. They're the honest ones. And the super honest ones say, I was actually very down. I was depressed. I realized what I've been chasing all that time. It wasn't actually that, it was the journey. And again, I don't want to turn into an absolute cliche machine. I'm just relaying what I've seen firsthand from all these people going, the journey was actually the biggest buzz. But I didn't realize that at the time because we're wired as humans to have an outcome. We're wired to like have an ending to the story. You know, there's no there's no Hollywood movies where you just go on this endless journey and it just keeps going. There's always like a start, middle, and end, right? The hero's journey, the framework of you go on a mission, you face some setbacks, you kind of have a breakthrough, then you go on another little mission again, and then the music starts to play. You have the big outcome at the end. You slay the dragon, you win the competition, they win the prize, whatever it is, and then the movie ends, right? That's how we're wired to kind of understand stories. So humans then kind of like seek that out in their own life. But 99% of the people I've spoken to have said, I just wanted to start again. And most of them have. Like I talked to a guy recently, he'd had a really good outcome. Like I think it was plus 30, 40 million. And I said, what'd you do like the Monday? Because I'm trying to find different ways to ask the question to get more insight. I was like, oh, what'd you do like the Monday after? You get up Monday, you don't have to be at the office, the bank account is healthy. And you're looking for a bit of fun as well. You're looking for a bit of an insight. He's like, I rang up like a few people I wanted to work at. And I was like, let's get started on something new. And you're like, that's wild. Like it's cool in a way to see how driven these people are, but they're addicted to the game. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And that can manifest itself then in really unhealthy ways, which you talked about there with the Peter Attia thing.
Yeah, it's it's also taps into that martyr complex. Like if you're like, okay, once I'm gonna have this awful lifestyle, but then once I get here, then everything is going to be great. And then you're obviously going to be feeling like rubbish if your lifestyle is awful. And then the money, as you've kind of alluded to, like it doesn't change anything because they've been feeling shit the whole process probably, or the buzz they're getting is the buzz from entrepreneurship. It kind of just reinforces like you should probably look at like what you're doing today and try and just make the best of the current situation. It was actually Tim Ferriss, I heard him saying, I was like, wow, that's so helpful. He was like, it's very hard if you're in like sixth gear, like going at 120 kilometers an hour. It's not like you just can switch that off if you've been doing that for 10 years. And like that
Yeah.
really resonated with me. I was like, oh, wow, that's actually a very good insight.
But it
Um,
becomes your identity, Connor. Like
mm,
that becomes who you are. Like we all, it's like when you go to a wedding, right? First thing people ask you, what do you do? What do you do? And like people can say, oh, I'm an accountant or, I own a gym or whatever. Whereas when someone's a business owner and then they sell it, what do you do? And they're like, they have this existential crisis of like, I don't know. I don't know what I do. I don't know what I am. I don't know where I'm going. So like, I can completely understand it. And I've thought about it a lot. So I've talked to them off camera then more about it, kind of going, "Can you just help me understand this? Like, why is this such a problem?" Because, and a few people have been really honest about me. They're like, I also have no one to talk to. Like, no one wants to talk to the millionaire who's bored. It's
uh,
like no one has sympathy for like, oh no, I don't know what to do with all my money and all my free time. People are like, face off. That's like the
yeah.
last problem you ever have. But it's all relative, like because they might have this is to go way back to your question, the business body brain. I was like, well, how can you enjoy yourself more now so that hopefully when you do, enjoy the journey more, that like when you do progress in your career and you unlock these milestones, all you're doing is more of what you're doing now. Because if you're a miserable
Yes.
prick when you're not rich, you'll be an even bigger miserable prick when you're rich. Like nothing will fundamentally change. It's not like you get this magical thing whereby, oh, now I'm really happy because I've got money. It'll just magnify what you probably already don't have.
Yeah, and I think like I'm just saying from personal experience, like I'm a personal trainer and I love fitness and my hobbies are mostly fitness as well. So what would happen to me is I would go through a phase of like I would just have a really difficult week at work or everyone's like saying no to wanting to sign up or whatever. And that would like really crush me because like it wasn't just my work, it was like pretty much everything from an identity standpoint. Um, and then over the last 2 years, I started Latin dancing, so salsa, and it's
Nice.
it's so much fun, and it's not anything like okay, it's movement, but it's not in the fitness realm. So regardless of how difficult the week is, I go dancing, and it's a really good source of community as well, which I think I'd actually like to hear your thoughts on that because like if you are running your own business, like you're kind of doing a lot of stuff by yourself a lot of the times, maybe until you hire people. Um,
Yeah.
do you see like isolation as being something entrepreneurs struggle with as well?
Oh, definitely. Like they all say it's lonely, right? They all say it's really lonely. So I'll put together like these dinners and breakfasts. And actually, it's one of the big projects for next year is I literally just emailed someone about it before we came on. I'm inviting up back all the previous guests from the podcast. We're going to do like, not like a party or not like a live pod, but just like this really relaxed gathering of everyone who's been on the podcast together. We're going to do like a round table pod, just like highlights, lowlights, or your wins this year, or your losses this year. Because I've done loads of little kind of like smaller events like that for entrepreneurs, like 12 people, breakfasts and dinners. And they love it because it's super lonely because there's certain topics that are just not talked about with your staff or with your family, or there can be a burden of responsibility there for them. So I think and I would encourage all entrepreneurs who are listening to find that third place, whether it's, a peer group. I always say just start your own peer group. Just reach out to like 4 or 5 entrepreneurs that are close to you, preferably in person. Like online's great and all, but like nothing tops like having a couple hours with people in a room. Because it's often the side chats that, because
Mm.
on Zoom and stuff, it can be a little bit stilted. People kind of put the best foot forward, but it's also like sometimes it's just this serendipitous thing of like, oh, I'm training for the marathon too. We should hook up and go for a run. That kind of stuff is really powerful. So I say to everybody, just start your own peer group. I think it's the biggest, apart from having the podcast thing. If I was a young entrepreneur again, I'd start a peer group of like 6 to 10 people who are on the journey similar to me. It's incredibly powerful because the loneliness and kind of like that lack of an outlet can be very, very difficult.
Yeah. Dan John, who's if you haven't heard of him, you actually probably really like his stuff. He's like 67, and his whole philosophy is like little and often, small little habits with training. He's like doing Olympic lifting at 67. He's just a legend in the fitness industry. And he was saying like he's speaking on the summit as well. He was saying that after 50 years of training and 40 years of coaching, that the number one thing that he's found most beneficial is like having an intentional community to do movement with every week. So people actually come to his house and they train at 9 a.m. 5 days a week. And he's like, he doesn't have to be motivated because people just they're at his door, so he has to train. Um, what have you done yourself personally, like from a intentional community?
It's a really good question because good pressure is what I think of because pressure has a really negative connotation because pressure isn't good. Cortisol, not good. But good pressure that you put on yourself and give yourself accountability is huge as an entrepreneur. It's one of the most important things you can have because when you work for yourself, there's no one to either reward you or punish you. There's no one to say, that was a great week, Gary. You're like, you hit all your targets, get everything done because there's always more to do. It's this never ending feast of like targets and goals. Whereas when you have a job, you you reach the end of the week and your job is done, head off home, not think about it. Whereas when you have your own business, you're constantly thinking about what's next, what should I be doing? You know, you're a little bit hard on yourself. Whereas when what I do is I have a accountability buddy. We meet every month and we map out the month ahead, going, this is what I'm going to do. And we've done this for years. We've done this for probably 3, 4 years now. And it's definitely one of the most powerful tools lever I've ever pulled, because it's not like he's going to like give out to me, but you also don't want to look like you're not doing your stuff, not like you're not like a serious operator. So we'll have these plans for the month ahead, going, right, what are you going to do this month? What are your big three? So I work off 3 big goals. What are your big 3 goals this month? How does that tie in what your goals are for the next year, 3 years, 5 years? Are you just to make sure you're not wandering off in all these different directions all the time,
Yeah.
because that can happen too as an entrepreneur. You get shiny object syndrome. You just wander off into the next hot thing. So always kind of like keeping you on track, going, are you tracing a line backwards to working on the biggest, most important thing? So the accountability piece every single month is huge, and definitely I would advise anyone to do that. Is just find someone, another entrepreneur or another person in the industry you're working in. Doesn't have to be the same business. Like my accountability buddy James, he owns a massive coffee business, nothing to do with media. The fundamental of the business is the fundamental of the business. What you're looking for in that person is someone who's diligent, who's disciplined, and who will stick with it with you. And then in terms of other accountability, I go to like a fitness class every day. I sign up, you have to go, that's it. Whereas I would go to the gym, but sometimes I would like not work at the intensity that I need to, because I think when you're on your own, there's a tendency to mess around your phone. There's a tendency to like, oh, I'm a bit sick today, I'll just take it a bit easier. Whereas I find when you sign up to something that's with other people, and get you out of your head for that hour, it's really, really important to have those kind of like valves you can pull during the day that just give you good pressure.
Yeah, and I think it's just it's such an important thing as well, because when you work for yourself, as you said, like no one's like, hey, what's going on Monday or Friday? But also your day is like basically open. It's not like you have to create your own structure. So I think there's a huge amount of instability in your life as a default when you're working for yourself. So actually having these kind of structures you can build in, like I think the class is a great idea. It's like, okay, whatever, 9 a.m. I need to rock up on Monday to
Well,
Friday,
and
and I
then
don't
it's
need to
done,
think about
right?
it. Yeah.
Then it's
Yeah.
done. Then you don't think about it like so. I'm always trying to have these systems, so I have to keep reinventing the wheel all the time. So I have like my fitness system, my nutrition system, my content system, my monetization system, because again, trying to have like these like very clear boundaries for myself, because I find I definitely get distracted a huge amount. So I'm trying to like work with the psychology that you have. Don't keep trying to fight against it. So I would find myself getting distracted a lot. So I would like write just a system. So you don't have to start every day from a blank page. Okay, today you're working on your content system. Okay, what does that involve? That involves you're going to have to work on this week's episode. Okay, your monetization system, that means you're going to have to work on your sponsor decks. So having very clear, so understanding your own psychology, doing the work really, like doing the work to understand your own psychology. And then when you understand it a little bit more, working with it, not against it. Don't keep trying to fight. Like I did that for ages. I would force myself to sit down and, okay, now work until 1 o'clock. Whereas now I have like this thing, I have an hourglass.
Oh, that's great.
So I'll turn that over and it's an hour and I'll work for the hour. Like, right, you're working on your content
It's
system
brilliant.
now for an hour. And just that helps me just visually, number one, but even just the physical art of doing that. Just go, right, okay, Gary,
Mm.
for an hour now, you're on your content system. Because I could have 30 different tabs open. I'd be hopping from one thing to the other, and you'd be firefighting, or you work on the thing that you like working on.
Hmm.
So for me, it's all about understanding my psychology and then working with it, not trying to like brute force it. I think sometimes you have a tendency to try brute force what you're doing. You just try fight against your natural tendencies. Whereas, like, what would happen if you just stack the deck in your favor to go, okay, you do suffer from a lot of like distracted thoughts. How can you do that? Okay, you can cut down into very manageable chunks. So from doing smaller sessions, I won't say it now, but I'll have Alexa down here and I'll do, hey, set a timer for X if it's a short task. and then I'll get that little dopamine rush at the end of 25 minutes, and then we move on to the next thing. So I would definitely say to entrepreneurs just to spend some time trying to understand your psychology, be honest with yourself, and then find ways of working and ignore the 9 to 5. Just get rid of that psychology because that's so deeply ingrained in us from school and college and work. This idea that you have to sit down from 9 to 5. The greatest gift COVID will give the world is that it made other people who aren't entrepreneurs see the world like entrepreneurs. Because now you realize, oh, I don't have to sit in a stupid cubicle. I don't have to sit in the traffic for like an hour and a half every day, there and back. If I'm disciplined and smart and clever, I can work here at home for like 1 to 2 days a week, and then I can go into the office 2 days a week. And it's not about how long you're working, it's what you're doing within those times. So I think as an entrepreneur, lean heavy into that, lean heavy into the fact that like the world is now geared for entrepreneurs. We're now geared for, it's now no longer seen as weird what we do, like the regular hours or the unusual work patterns. The world is moving that way.
And the productivity side of things, like all of the research now around sleep and exercise, like if you're a, well, I'm not sure, you can probably answer this better than most people, is like, are any corporations now really like leaning into that and being like, oh, if we like optimize our staff, we're going to get way more output out of them? Like, is anyone thinking that way?
Oh, they all are. If you're just listening to this, I'm doing air quotes. They all are. Like, because it's the thing to do. Corporate social
Yeah,
responsibility, employee welfare, every single buzzword you can think of in your life. Would they cut you on a Monday morning if they had a bad quarter? Sure as shit they would. So
yeah,
no one will manage that for you. Manage it yourself. Don't look to other people to solve your problems. Never look to someone else to shape your future. Be the CEO of your own health, of your own life, of your own outcome. Because if you rely on a big company to do that, a couple of things will happen. Golden handcuffs kick in. Your cost of living goes up because you know you're earning 150 grand from Google for sending some emails. Life gets comfortable. You start doing 3, 4 holidays a year. Or the other thing is like you get kind of like used to this big company environment. I've seen this a lot. I've chatted to a lot of founders who were like, yeah, we got our first round of funding. I hired someone from insert big company name here. I thought to be unreal. They were absolutely useless because they couldn't work not in a big company environment. So you have to maintain that level of hunger yourself. You don't look to other people to solve your problems. That's for sure. Like your company isn't going to sort your sleep. Your company isn't going to sort out your health. No one is. Like who puts the food in your mouth? You do. Like you make the choices. You decide if you go to bed and you mess around in TikTok for 2 hours until 11 o'clock. So no one is going to solve that. And it's not an information thing. People use this like, oh, I never knew that. You never knew alcohol was bad for you? Come on. Like it's not an information thing anymore. It's a personal will thing.
yeah. The sleep research is pretty crazy. I don't know if you've looked into much of it now, but like, so even like one of the stats from Andy Galpin, I don't know if you know him. He'd be like one of the
Mm.
top sports scientists in the world. It's like 20% reduction in like getting the flu, which is like insane. I'm not sure how they actually quantify that, but like that's a huge, like if you're a corporation and there's going to be 20% less people getting sick if you can improve their sleep, like that's pretty amazing.
It is, but it's also the tangible thing of like, how do you measure that? How
Yeah.
do you measure if Gary or Connor is going to get the flu in 6 months' time because we told them to have good 90s in October? Like, it's not, that's not,
Yeah.
yeah, I buy into it as a theory. Sleep's
Yeah.
hugely important. So the one thing, actually, the one sleep insight I've had, um, because I can't really control my sleep at the minute because my daughter, the one insight I've had is going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. That's the one thing I can control because I can't control if she's going to wake up or not, but I can control when I go to bed and when I get up. And like the new research coming out on that, I'm sure you've seen it, is huge. Like that consistent wake time. And again, to shill something, Whoop is like the best tool I've ever had. I've had it 5 years now. And like
Wow.
that, the insights from that over time, um, invaluable. Like, and just again, taking charge, kind of going, getting the data, going, right, okay, I slept like crap last night. Why would that might be? Well, I ate my dinner at like 8 o'clock. Okay, let's just try eat at 5 today and see. It's all about taking personal responsibility. The sleep thing is huge and like makes total sense. Because why would it not impact you, you know?
If someone's listening and they're in a they work for someone and they're like, oh, I like the idea of entrepreneurship or even just making more money, not necessarily, stopping everything and starting your own thing, but just starting
Mm.
to make some extra income on the side and maybe seeing what happens. Like, what would
Mm.
be some, I know this is a very broad question, but what would be some initial steps you would recommend that person to start focusing on?
Do anything. Do literally anything. I get bombarded.
Yeah.
Bombarded by messages. Two things. I want to start a podcast. I want to start my own business. What should I do? And the simple answer is start. Do anything because what you start will not resemble what you finish with. Like you can't. I'm at this podcast 5 years now. It's only in the last two that I feel like I've hit any kind of stride with it at all. So there's 3 years of just graft and just figuring stuff out and trying and failing. But the biggest mistake people make is just they talk about it and talk about it and talk about it because that gives them the cheap dopamine. Oh, this is a
Mm.
great idea, Gary, for this thing. Like you're like, cool, okay. Have you built anything? No, no, no. Oh, I can't because you're like, no, you can't because you're lazy. You can't because you're afraid. Fear is the biggest killer of business. It's not like money, or it's not like the economy, or it's not like any of these other things you hear about all the time. It's fear, the fear to stop you starting. Not starting kills more businesses than anything in the world because people will let that initial fear, because it's really hard. But in today's economy, there is zero stopping you because you've every single tool available for like a tenner a month or free. So you can test the idea, you can build the idea, you can get a website launched in like 30 seconds now. A friend of mine has built this unbelievable new tool. When is this episode going live?
Next week.
Okay, I don't think I can.
Ah,
I'll give it to you in the show notes, right? He's this thing called Big Team,
cool,
right?
cool.
Big Team essentially is this AI team. You literally go in, you're like, I need a website for my pizzeria. It's called Connor's Pizzeria. In 30 seconds, it will generate a full website. It'll generate every single thing you need to go live in a website within 60 seconds. There's nothing stopping you anymore. And within that team, then you can go, you get like all these little marketing AI bots. It's like, hey, generate me 7 social posts for the next 7 days talking about my new pizzeria in Wicklow. No problem. Done. It'll give you 7 social posts for the day. So we're coming on a wave now whereby there is nothing stopping you. You don't need a premises. You don't need money. You don't need, you don't need like a decade of experience. You need the will to start. So like to not to give you a flippant answer is that whatever you're interested in, just start doing something, making something for somebody. I get a load of people messaging me going, oh, I want to work with you on the podcast. Do you know how many send me actually anything, send me any kind of sample or anything? Zero. Zero will send you the extra step of like, I'd love to work with you on the podcast. I took one of your episodes and I broke it down. I took out like the 5 key insights and I've done you a blog post. And then from those 5 key insights, done you a LinkedIn carousel. And from that, I've done you an
Love it.
Instagram post. They're the steps, right? That if you want to start working with someone or for yourself, just start building things. Just start making stuff because distribution is the number one challenge you'll face as a new business owner. And what I mean by distribution is people understanding that you're there, people understanding what you do, getting that message to people. It's never been easier, never been harder because you can distribute your message instantly now with like you can set up Instagram, you can set up LinkedIn, you can set up TikTok, you can set up Twitter. So you can get your message out there, but you're competing with so much noise. So it will take time to cut through that noise. But the sooner you start, the sooner you'll figure out going, oh, people aren't responding to this, but weirdly, they're all picking up on this other thing, which I thought was just a stupid thing I did on Tuesday, but they love that. Maybe I'll do more of that. That's the only way to start a business is to start tweaking. Like I've lost count of the amount of times people have said to me, going, my idea was actually Y, and then it ended up being Z because we suddenly realized people don't want to buy coffee at 6 p.m. They want to buy it at 8 a.m. And we only realized that because we're open all day. We realized, oh, everyone's
Mm,
coming in at 8 a.m. We didn't know that. It's a stupid example, but you get my point. You have to
yeah.
be in, you have to be in momentum. You have to be in the arena to actually figure out what's going on. You will not build a business by reading blog posts, by thinking about it, by talking about it with your friends. Everyone looks to other people to say, that's a really good idea, Connor. You should definitely do that. You don't need those other people to tell you. You just need to figure it out and tell the customers to tell you because they're the only people that matter.
Yeah, mate. Like just taking personal responsibility is a big thing that has come up repeatedly from you over the last hour, and then taking action. I think your advice there of like if you want to get some work with someone, like literally taking action and making life easier for someone like yourself, and then that person goes to the top of the pile, like maybe when you're looking at hiring as well.
By a mile, by a mile. A friend of mine was hiring a couple of days ago, and he's like, Gary, I have 200 CVs. He's like, I cannot think of anything worse.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I said to him, I was like, did anyone like go around the houses? Like, did anyone do anything clever? Did anyone like, like send a package to your office? And he's like, no, no one did
Oh,
anything.
wow.
They
That's a huge
all
opportunity.
monstrous. Like, and I like people hire people. People do business with people. Like, what can you do? We live in a digital world, right? So everyone just thinks, oh, I'll just do a digital submission because it's easy. And we're all a little bit lazy. If we're honest, we're all just a bit lazy. But instead, if you'd taken the time, created something, I'm a big fan of like a physical package or a physical gift or a physical
Yes.
something because suddenly you've jumped from the digital to the real and there's like a real opportunity there. Like people are always going on to me about like, oh, AI and AI in podcasts. And have you seen this new AI podcast tool? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's brilliant. It only makes what I do more, more powerful because it makes the human interaction and the human element far more powerful because people will crave human interaction because AI podcasts, I couldn't think of anything worse. They're great for summaries and stuff, but nothing will beat two people sitting down like we're doing now and actually having a proper conversation.
Yeah, we tried a lot of chat automations over the last 12 months and like they're okay, but just human chatting is just way better. Like human interaction up to a point. Mate, I'm conscious of your time. Last question I want to finish with is what you've changed your mind on recently. And by recent, we'll say the last 12 months.
That's a really good question. What have I changed my mind on recently? I used to think I would live in Ireland forever, and now I don't think so.
Wow. Yeah,
Mm.
explain.
I I'd never even considered it, to be honest. I've lived abroad, I've lived in the States and stuff like that, but I'd always kind of thought, oh, like I'd live in Ireland. We were lucky enough we were able to buy a house a couple of years ago, 5 years ago now. But after COVID, then we didn't go anywhere for 5 years. Like we were trying to buy a house and then we're trying to have a baby, and we really kind of hunkered down and kind of withdrew into ourselves quite a bit. And it was only when we kind of emerged from it, it was like a fever dream. I was like, my God, I kind of like shut myself off from the world. And it was only after COVID, I was like, right, we're gonna like really embrace freedom again and embrace the flexibility of being able to go abroad. So we spent like 2 months in Spain last year. And the flexibility that gave me and the insight that gave me into like that I was on the right track, that I was doing the right thing, that the media business was something that I wanted to pursue, and that flexibility in life is really, really important to me now because I used to kind of think, you know, I'll buy a house and we'll live here and that'll be that. But then I think really like opening up my eyes to the world and kind of going, the media business is going to give you this flexibility. And I think people are gonna, my gut feeling is that more and more people are going to start doing this, that they're going to, and you can kind of see it happening now, they're going to spend like 2, 3 months away from Ireland at a time. And I think it's going to become not the norm, but a lot of like, you see, digital nomads get a bad rep because it generally was people just going off to Bali, YOLOing their life and having the crack. But I think I'm seeing a huge amount of more people my age now who have kids and who have like jobs and lives kind of going, yeah, no, we're going to spend like a month with so and so in like Australia, or we're going to go to America, or we're going to do this. And I think that is a brilliant thing. I think the fact that we now have such flexibility, and I touched on it earlier, more people are getting to live like entrepreneurs in a good way, is in like they're getting to live with a bit more freedom and a bit more flexibility. And I think that can only be a good thing in terms of like having a better business, having a better body, having a better brain, being able to like being out in the world and kind of living life on your own terms.
Love it, man. That's a big change over the last 12 months for you. So
Yeah, look, I think it's been coming for a while. I think it's not fair to say it came in the last 12 months, but it's definitely been coming in the last 2, 3 years when we were like, right, beyond COVID, now we're really going to like catch up on a lot of stuff that we missed out on. But it definitely has been like you have to try these things. Like I said to you there, like I do live by that experimental idea, like it's called the entrepreneur experiment. I do live by the idea of doing experiments to see, like we said, all right, let's go see what it feels like to live somewhere for 2 months, as opposed to like
mm.
just going for 2 weeks coming back. And it was beautiful. It was just brilliant. Like just and like I think the way the world is now, like you can just book an apartment for 2 months. Like it's mad. Like we've such flexibility. I think it's a really cool way the world is going, that like we now have such flexibility, and we're lucky enough to live in a country like Ireland that affords us like very close proximity to so many cool places that we probably don't really realize.
Yeah, and getting out of Ireland for like December, January, February is not a bad time either.
That would be the dream, to be honest. That would be the
Yeah,
dream. It's one of my busiest times of the year. If I could be abroad right now, I would be. We'd come back, and we went for September and we came back in October as, yeah, straight back into like flu and cold and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff. So yeah, I look, I can see the appeal. I can see why people, as they get a bit older, like decide to like spend the winter months abroad, because why the hell not? Like you only get one life. You only get one go at it. Like,
yeah,
this,
big
you
time.
touched on something earlier, and I'll wrap on this now, is that the two saddest words in the English language are when
Mm,
I X, I'll be Y. When I get this, I'll do this. No way. Do it today. Do it right now. Me and my wife have this thing, we call it millionaire mornings. We kind of like retrofitted our lives. So I kept saying to her, I was like chatting to all these incredible people and kind of having these realizations that like it's the journey, not like the destination. And we kind of come up with this thing called millionaire mornings. What would like a millionaire morning look like? And it's very simple. Like it's very, very simple. Getting out with the family, going for a walk along the beach, having like a really good coffee, not been rushed, like nothing that takes millions of euro, but just takes a little bit of time to go. We have a tendency to get up in the morning, rush to here, rush to there, rush to here, rush to there. Whereas like when you kind of take a step back and go millionaire morning, and we do these things called life breakfast every month, where we sit down and we just like just appreciate the month that's gone by and then look ahead to the month that's coming. The thing so often you're always rushing to the next thing. You're always rushing to like the next meeting
mm.
or the next thing I have to do. Whereas just to slow down and go, you know, I interviewed a guy a few years ago, and he was a billionaire on paper. And I was like, I'm just gonna study him and like watch what he does. And I got to spend like probably half a day with him. And he was never rushed. He was never
That's
under pressure. And it was the one thing I took away from him. You see a lot of people, and it was at a conference, and conferences are very stressful. Everyone's running around, people coming in, and I just kind of looked from like one person to another. I looked at him, and then I looked at this guy who came rushing in. He'd like a raincoat, hat hanging off him. These people who always have their backpack half open. You look like you're running for school, but like you're a grown man. You've got your backpack half open on your bag and hair all over the place. And I was just like, to go back to my original point, that's a choice to get up that extra 30 minutes late, to be flapping, not to have left your clothes out the night before, not to have thought about where am I going to get there, how am I going to get there, what am I going to eat, what am I going to look like, how's that going to feel. So I kind of shifted around all my kind of like my life to like have systems. So like I have a really minimal wardrobe now. I always plan my
Mm.
week out exactly in advance. I know where I'm going to be at a certain time. And it's just those little things, those little tweaks you make to your life, just to slow it down and go, you don't have to have millions, to have a really rich life. You just have to be a little bit more deliberate and a little bit more thoughtful and just to take charge of your own life.
That was an epic monologue to finish with, my man. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, mate. You're a real pro.
Very
You
welcome.
shared so much wisdom, and it was really great to connect. And I really appreciate you supporting the summit, most importantly. Okay.
Not at all, man. I'm really, really happy to be involved. And like, look, I'm only just recounting some of the knowledge I've picked up from incredibly talented people who've shared it with me. So if I can even just relay some of that onto others, and just I'm just a real supporter of what you're doing. I think mental health in Ireland really needs more focus and more of a light get to get shone on it. So it needs people like you, what I talked about earlier, the doers who'll actually put something together and actually take action. That's where real change comes from, not from people wringing their hands going, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible.
Hmm.
It comes from people like you actually putting their hand up and going, well, let's just do something about it. And it comes from things like you're doing. So massive congrats to you for putting it together.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate that.